Now back to our regular programming style. Notice how my voice and cadence changes versus the last episode where I was on camera. When I was on camera, I was in my headspace. I was still connected to the source. My connection is all the time now. It's taken some practice, of course. But I want to draw your attention to the difference because most of the world, especially in binary linear societies, are ruled from the headspace, predominantly only the headspace. We have thoughts, we have opinions, we have analyses, we have humor, we have expressions and reactions. This is a very important fundamental part of human behavior. And traditionally speaking, the world rewards and operates on the headspace. I believe that this is related to the beta waves. There's a certain configuration of brainwave activity. And consequently, when you start on this journey and as you progress onto this journey, what you're going to find, and I know some of you have experienced this because you talked to me about it, is a desire to be less in the headspace, to be more centered, more grounded, more relaxed, sometimes alone. Some people have self-judgments about that. And they crave this regeneration time or meditation time. And there's sometimes friends and family, particularly if they're predominantly in the beta wave activity and the headspace activity, and that's all they've ever known, they may not understand. And so when they see you going to your room, going back home, or refusing to go on social outings, or not doing the things that you used to do, or even communicating in the same way, they might impose a judgment on top of you that something is wrong. They might give you a label of they're depressed or they have mental issues, and depending on your personal psychology and susceptibility, you might take these on because this might be the only framework of understanding for what is happening to you. I am not here to say the mental illness is not real because I know many people that suffer from it. And I also believe that there are many other people that just don't have the right bucket terminology to describe their experience. And now, having been on the journey for a little bit, I can confidently say that there are different expressions of our humanity, that society is, at this point in time, depending on where you're at, but where I'm at, definitely, needs to stretch and is in the process of stretching to allow room for other modalities of interacting, where it's okay to say, I'm not feeling the vibe. I know I bought a ticket. I know I'm here, but actually I'm really not resonating with this at all. And the people that you're with being like, oh, I get it. Yeah, we'll see you next time. Feel free to duck out. As opposed to having to sit there and grinning and bearing it out of this expectation for social behavior. That's one example. Not everybody would follow that example, but there are many other examples of this. Going to a party and having just vapid conversation or gossiping, because that's what you do in certain circles and families. Like you just talk about other people. And inside you're dying. You're suffering inside because it's not how you want to interact. You'd rather go home and hang out alone with your plants and listen to music. And depending on how you are raised and conditioned to believe that you're supposed to be in social dynamics, you might internalize that there's something wrong with you. But perhaps you're just awakening. Obviously, of course, if you do feel that there's something wrong with you, please get checked out by the appropriate professional. But I speak to a lot of people on the awakening journey that deep down actually are afraid because they're changing and they can feel that they're changing, but how they're supposed to show up in their life is not changing. And when you start to change those templates, you change your point of attraction. You change your vibe. You change your likes, your dislikes. When you're about to undergo a shift, this is what I wanted to share with you tonight because this is where I'm at right now. You might lose interest in things that you used to vibe with, and people and places and things and activities. It is pronounced sometimes, particularly if the personality is also coming online and you have different aspects of you that are wanting to be expressed. And if you are seated in a community that wants you to color within the lines, this is really, really important because this is often unspoken, but implicitly you will feel it. Sometimes explicitly you'll have pressure too. People will say, I don't get it, you've changed. And then you'll feel this disappointment. Like if you used to be the life of the party, or you used to be the storyteller or the jokes person, and you start showing up differently, you're going to see who really needs you to play a certain role and color within the lines of their coloring book. And sometimes that's a rude awakening as you start to untangle the conditional love patterns in your life. I'm actually not opposed to conditional love because I find that it has value in certain segments and chapters, particularly if people are still in their shadow journey. It's helpful to say, this doesn't work for me, and to withdraw, and to love from afar differently. Your point of attraction can be thought of as the avatar of you. But normally when we say avatar, we think of the physical form. But it's more than just the physical form. It's your vibration. It's how you stand. It's how you move. It's how you feel frustration, if you feel frustration. It's how you sleep. It's how you eat. It's how you behave. And then there's another aspect of your consciousness, the awareness of self, of others, of beyond. It's the construction of your gifts, almost like a mosaic, that if we were to map out along your journey, you would have different pieces of the mosaic that would bing, come online at different times. And when you zoom out and look at it from the kaleidoscope level and just pause and take a frame of where you're at in your journey, that holistically is your point of attraction. All of those elements combined communicate with the outside, inside worlds, the ether, and bring people and opportunities to you, or send your lifelines or your energy lines, your destiny lines, out into the material world and actually aggregate matter in a certain way for which that you can connect with certain people and opportunities. And so when you start to change your mosaic significantly, substantially, or in key ways, what you're going to find is that all of a sudden, people just drop off. You have disruptions in your life. You might lose a job. You might have just a spontaneous breakup because your point of attraction is actually undergoing a shift. And if you're honest with yourself, then it's reciprocal. Like, for example, there is this artist woman in my community, and we had coffee once and we're developing a friendship, and I could feel that even though I liked her, I went to her gallery opening, I went to her art show, I supported her, and I bought a piece of her art, like I was cheering for her. I showed up for her, and she was doing the same for me, and we were developing this really beautiful friendship. But all of a sudden, I could feel that we weren't in alignment. And it just felt like even though we were trying to make plans with each other, I couldn't go. I couldn't show up because I knew if I did, it would be inauthentic because my point of attraction was changing. And so recently, I bumped into her on the street, and now I've seen her like every day since. It's really interesting. And we got into this conversation about technology and transhumanism and AI, and she is adamantly opposed. And many people are, but I think it can be done well. And I think it's exciting if it is done well. And in fact, I spend a lot of my free time thinking about how to do it well for humanity, and think about the constructs of the applications of technology and the integration with consciousness, and actually think about ways that we can upgrade our psychology to make it easier, to make living more harmonious, to make this whole process more advantageous, in my opinion, and to break away from the human-centric perspective which dominates our worldview, but is ultimately an illusion. Actually, it's completely an illusion. And so as we were talking, it became very clear to both of us that we were very much at odds. She even said, I'm surprised you're into this, because we were so diametrically opposed that she was in disbelief. And we said our goodbyes, and it was polite and it was kind, but we both walked away knowing that we're not in vibrational alignment. But that doesn't mean that the other person's alignment is wrong. It just means that we just don't vibe and we're not resonating now. And so when you start to shift, you're going to notice things like that. And if you're working with people who are also advanced on the journey, there's no rejection wound. Like, I don't feel rejected by her. She doesn't feel rejected by me. It's just kind of like, okay. I even made a joke where I said that I'll send her a text in her medieval castle once I have implemented some of the designs that I was thinking about. And so, you can have fun with it, right? And similarly, as you start to shift, the content that you consume may change as well. Like, for example, I had a breakthrough recently to another lifeline, and I am in the middle of a shift right now. And you can see it more on my Rumble channel, where I'm practicing self-expression in a different way and doing spiritual art. And then last week I did a channeling session. and where it was a quantum channeling session. And I worked with the energy of people, and I did some energy activations and some spiritual teachings. And this terrifies me. It's like stepping into the unknown, and it's quite a growth moment for me. And afterwards, the energy alignment of that was so profound that I received so much clarity that that's where I'm going in the future. And so I was resting in that energetic state. My mosaic changed. Other fragments of me were coming online, and I was bringing that into my everyday world. And all of a sudden, I couldn't watch a podcast of a favorite astrologer for the entire week. I couldn't do it. And it wasn't until my energy shifted back into where I'm at now that I was able last night to actually watch his weekly episode, even though another one is out tonight. And so there is a repelling where I was like, I'm not part of that group. I can't receive there. I can't receive from this direction. And similarly, what you're going to find is that when you go with the flow and you release the self-judgment and you stop trying to force yourself to color in the lines of belonging when you're outgrowing that belonging, or when you sense that you have new gifts and abilities coming online, or aspects to your personality, or that you want to spend time in a different headspace, not from the head only. You want to dip into alpha and maybe gamma, and then back to beta. And you want to sort of dance in between this halfway meditation or hypnosis versus what predominates in our world and our society, which has a different energetic frequency. Sometimes it's a great vibe, it's like, it can stress you out in a good way and a negative way too, but let's break away from the duality for a moment. It's just a different vibe. And when we start to realize that there are many people that are holed up in their bedrooms, shifting their energy, quote unquote, escaping the world, tapping out of unfulfilling social encounters, unremarkable moments of the day that are repetitive and nonstop, and pulling away from it all, going within, receiving downloads. Like, meditation is fun. Like, when you get to a certain point, it's really fun. And then you see the world differently, and that's really fun too. And then you get to make different art, and it's a really delightful experience. And so when we make room for that, and we normalize and we say it's part of the journey, then we allow for our point of attraction to change. And when we allow for that point of attraction to change, we allow for the full unfolding, the full shift event to really occur. So listen, I am indeed a reality shifting coach and an ascension coach as well for those of you that are undergoing a spiritual awakening journey. I talk a lot about the shadow patterns, but I also love helping people awaken their gifts and their abilities and to elevate parts of their humanity that maybe other people don't talk about so much. I love seeing you deeply and bringing that potential out into the everyday world, connecting you with the higher purpose and the vibration of authenticity. It's one of my favorite types of client work, actually. So if you're interested, if you feel the call, feel free to reach out to me, sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.